Hi, I'm Andy Miocha and you're watching AnewZ. Weekend unrest hits Georgian breakaway region Abkhazia. Vladimir Putin speaks to Olaf Scholz, first time since 2022. Xi and Biden hold talks as China signals openness to Trump era. Georgian breakaway region Abkhazia has been embroiled in turmoil over the weekend after protesters stormed the local parliament demanding the resignation of the Russian-backed separatist region's president Aslan Bzhanya. He gave conditions on which he would resign. We go now to the occupation line a few kilometers from Zugdidi, where our Leila Rahimli brings the story.
The leader of the separatist region of Abkhazia, Aslan Bzhanya, has filled Sukhumi amid opposition demands for his resignation, highlighting the region's political instability. The unrest stems from a recent investments deal signed between Abkhazia and Russia. This agreement allows Russian companies to buy property and launch projects in Abkhazia, including building multi-use facilities. Critics argue that the deal threatens Abkhazia's self-declared independence and increase its reliance on Moscow. Protests have erupted in response, with demonstrators blocking key routes, including the Gumista, Lower Gumista and Kodori bridges. The situation escalated when protesters took over the parliament building, demanding Bzhanya's resignation. A proposal to replace him with his deputy Badra Gumba was rejected by the opposition, who insists that the entire leadership team step down. This reflects widespread distrust in the current administration. The crisis has revived debates about Georgia's territorial unity. Georgian Parliament Speaker Shalva Papuashvili blamed the chaos in Abkhazia on the presence of an occupying power. Meanwhile, President Salome Zurabishvili voiced support for Abkhazia's civic groups, describing their actions as resistance to Russian dominance. Georgian officials suggest that these developments could be part of calculated effort to reintegrate Abkhazia. Russia remains focused on maintaining control over Abkhazia and Ossetia. However, the ongoing conflict in Ukraine has made these regions seem like a burden. Some experts believe Moscow might consider addressing Georgia's territorial disputes to relieve its own geopolitical challenge while strengthening its message of rewarding allies and penalizing opponents. Despite this, it appears unlikely that Russia would tolerate Western involvement in these areas. Bzhanya's swift departure under opposition pressure has raised question about Moscow's role in orchestrating events behind the scenes. Experts think that without tacit approval from the Kremlin, such a sudden move by Abkhazia's leadership would have been unlikely. Some experts say even if the opposition gains power, major changes are expected due to underlying material interests. These developments also affect Georgia's relationship with Western countries, which support Georgia's push for European Union and NATO integration while countering Russian influence in the region. Abkhazia's location on the Black Sea makes it a key area in this struggle for power. However, internal conflict in Abkhazia may complicate Russia's plan and shift the regional balance. The Georgian government has set a bold goal of restoring territorial unity by 2013. This requires not only international backing, but also addressing the needs and concerns of the Abkhazia and South Ossetian communities. The current crisis could provide an opening for Georgia to advance its goals, though much depends on Russia's action and the broader global contexts. And this is Leila Rahimli reporting from Occupation Line, AnewZ.
That was Leila Rahimli reporting from near the occupation line of the Georgia's breakaway region, Abkhazia. We spoke to several experts on the unrest. Here's what Pata Davitaya of the Georgian Party of European Democrats had to say.
Ситуация сложена в Абхазии сложная. На сегодняшний день идет народное выступление против.
The situation in Abkhazia is complex. Currently, there is a public uprising against the position of the separatist authorities, specifically regarding the so-called apartments law, which the parliament was supposed to ratify a year ago. This law stipulates that land in Abkhazia cannot be transferred to someone who is not an Abkhazian citizen. To address this, a law was introduced to ensure the safety of Russian investment. It allows for the construction of buildings on Abkhazian land, funded by investments, with the apartments being owned by the investors themselves. Everyone in Abkhazia understands the financial difficulties the region is facing. There is concern that the incoming funds would effectively lead to Abkhazia being entirely bought out. As a result, the public is opposing this. The apartments law was halted, but a new investment law was proposed and required ratification, sparking further protests from the population. The so-called president is now in hiding. The presidential administration and the government administration are surrounded by the people. The so-called president is currently in his ancestral village of Tamish. He has been given time to resign. He is negotiating, saying he will step down if the buildings are vacated, after which new elections will take place. The opposition is fighting for access to Russian budgetary funds. This is a reality. The administration is using the protests to present its stance, claiming they are not against Russia. Meanwhile, the president and the authorities in Abkhazia have created a difficult situation, trying to secure these funds for themselves. In reality, this is all about money. Russia, at this stage, is not losing anything. It will intervene at the right moment to install someone who can maintain control. If the current authorities remain in power, they will still be under Russia's control. The situation shows that Abkhazia does not know what to do with its independence. It's entirely dependent on the Russian Federation. Russia has already announced that it will stop funding Abkhazia and has already reduced its financial support. Now, the question is whether it will withdraw funding altogether. I believe they will have to concede to Russia to some extent. We will likely see Russian envoys sent to resolve these issues. In my opinion, the president will have to resign, as the population no longer supports him. Elections are scheduled for 2025, but it seems that within 2 months of his resignation, early presidential elections will be held. I'm confident that the opposition forces will win these elections. However, the same opposition forces will continue Russia's policies but will try to implement them in a slightly different way.
Not everyone shares the exact same views on the events unfolding in the separatist Abkhazia. Here's the take of political analyst Levan Mamaladze.
В Абхазии идущие процессы и люди, которые протестуют, они реально уже какой-то этап добили своего.
In Abkhazia, ongoing processes are unfolding. The protests have already yielded some results, with the president fleeing to his village, although he has not resigned yet. It is important to note that such events in Abkhazia are not unprecedented. Abkhazian society is clan-based, with various clans cooperating in different ways with Moscow's structures, particularly security agencies and special services. These clans frequently clash with one another. The immediate cause of the unrest was a proposal from Russia for the so-called Abkhaz parliament to pass a law granting certain preferences to Russian businesses.
Абхазский парламент, так называемый, должен был принять решение о неких преференциях.
Since Abkhazia is entirely associated with Russia, it is evident that Russian businesses are seeking to enter the region and secure additional privileges. This includes the right to use land, mortgages to attract investments, and other similar measures. Although the draft law was prepared, it has now been blocked. The situation should not be seen as a protest against Russia, but rather as a clash between clans. The situation in Abkhazia remains highly complex. Additionally, a new dynamic has emerged as Georgia has extended a proposal to Abkhazia, seeking its support and expressing an interest in integration. It is too early to predict the form or format this integration might take, especially given the history of war and bloodshed. This is a separate issue, closely tied to the restoration of territorial integrity. A relevant example here is Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev's approach to the seemingly insurmountable Nagorno-Karabakh issue, which could serve as a precedent in Abkhazia's case. The situation is challenging. The Abkhazians are reluctant to hand over control to Russian businesses without resistance. From my perspective, Russia's push to involve its businessmen, invest and secure access to Abkhazian territory is a strategic move. Abkhazia's unique coastal territory offers significant potential for business ventures. I believe there is a political undertone to this. Sooner or later, the question of Abkhazia's status concerning Georgia will need to be addressed. Should Russian businesses gain control over key areas, it will provide Russia with significant leverage, regardless of Abkhazia's eventual status within or outside Georgia. This is a critical consideration. Another crucial aspect is the demographic situation. The population of ethnic Abkhazians is catastrophically declining. Additionally, there are groups from southern Abkhazia, particularly in Ochamchira, belonging to a narrow clan that has always faced internal competition. Meanwhile, the largest diaspora in Abkhazia is Armenian. This is often overlooked as the Armenian community has remained relatively quiet. However, at some point, they may assert themselves, further complicating the situation. I believe Moscow aims to stabilize the situation, though it may regret its deep involvement in this region. From Georgia's perspective, Abkhazia is considered occupied territory. Russia will eventually be forced to make decisions, as it cannot maintain the status quo indefinitely, despite officially recognizing Abkhazia. Sooner or later, the future of Abkhazia will need to be resolved. Even if Abkhazia remains part of Georgia, it will likely be granted special status and unique powers. We can draw comparisons between developments in Abkhazia and Adjaria, or between Sukhumi and Batumi. This is a reality. For now, Georgia maintains good neighborly relations with Russia, avoiding sanctions and adhering to diplomatic ties, despite the challenges. I hope that in the near future, Russia will begin taking steps to resolve this issue.
In what was an hour-long call between German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and Russian President Vladimir Putin, their first conversation since 2022, both sides held their known views. Kyiv criticized the call. For details, we go to Moscow and Dasha Chernishova.
For the first time in almost 2 years, Russian President Vladimir Putin talked to a head of a leading Western nation, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. Moscow described the one-hour phone call as frank and detailed exchange of views over the situation in Ukraine. Scholz urged Russia to show willingness to negotiate with Ukraine with the aim of achieving a just and lasting peace. Putin insisted that Moscow never refused the talks and that any agreement should take Russia's security interests into account. Putin also told the German leader that any agreement should proceed from the new territorial realities and that the root causes of the conflict must be addressed. Scholz stressed that Germany would continue to support Ukraine for as long as needed. The call comes at a time of widespread uncertainty about how the approach of the incoming administration of U.S. President-elect Donald Trump could change the course of the conflict that is approaching a 1,000-day mark. Donald Trump has previously claimed he will be able to end the conflict in Ukraine within a day of taking office. Kyiv's European allies are concerned that the Trump administration will see military and financial support from America to Ukraine fall away. The Kremlin said Germany initiated the call and Ukraine criticized it, saying the call had opened a Pandora's box. Moscow also says that the discussion touched upon Russian-Germany ties, with Putin noting unprecedented decline in all areas. Dasha Chernishova, in Moscow for AnewZ.
That was Dasha Chernyshova reporting from Moscow. We earlier spoke on the Scholz-Putin call to Anna Vandensky, international journalist and political commentator.
It was a much more an egoistic impulse of Mr. Scholz, German Chancellor, than an attempt to resolve Ukrainian conflict. Because as we understand from both positions, they remain unchanged. The Chancellor repeated the official position, and he is still standing on 10-point Zelensky plan. This is a plan of return of Ukraine to the borders of 1991. So this plan remains unchanged. And of course, he once again called Putin to withdraw all Russian troops from Ukrainian territory, meaning Ukrainian territory in this 1991 borders. If we take his opponent point of view, it also is unchanged. So Russian side also demanded to take into consideration the new realities, meaning this 20% of Ukrainian territory that is under Russian control. And Putin also said that the major reason for the conflict is NATO expansion, and this problem should be resolved because without refusal of NATO to expand further east, there will be no conflict resolution. So we see that the positions remain the same. Olaf Scholz is suffering a tremendous political defeat in Germany. Of course, he is trying to save his reputation, which is impossible to save because it's completely burnt. I don't know why some people call him a lame duck, because I think he's already, he looks like a fried geese. You know, his political reputation is buried. So his attempts to make an impression on his electorate is rather wasted, because now already Germans are looking into the future. They are assessing the next chancellor and they're making further plans. So, but it was painful, of course, for President Zelensky, because he thinks that it's in a certain way it breaks this silence, this isolation of Kremlin that was created as a result of Russian invasion. But I think he exaggerated a little bit because the isolation remains largely, and this is a German chancellor that is leaving his position. He's leaving his official job, and that's why we can't really consider that to be a breakthrough, because the breakthrough will be when President Trump will call, when most probably Sir Starmer will call, and of course Macron. So they are the politicians who are active and who are not in the situation of leaving their position and their status. There is no isolation as such. Russia is far too big and far too influential, and let's not forget it's one of the major United Nations member states. So we can't isolate Russia. It's physically impossible. It's juridically impossible. And of course, Russia is very important exporter of oil and gas on world markets, even if Europe says it rejects it, but it couldn't reject it fully, because still European households and European industry needs Russian at least gas, if not oil, because of course oil world markets is very well developed and there are a lot of terminals, so that can be avoided. But still Russia is far too big to stay isolated. It has never been isolated. Of course, there is this animosity from the ensemble of Western countries within the situation of expansion of NATO and Russian opposition to this perspective. But I think that this telephone call will not change a lot in the assessment of Russia, because from one hand, Chancellor Scholz is on the way out. That's inevitable. That's clear. His career, the trajectory of his political career, is in absolute and I would say fatal decline. fatal decline because Germans are very unhappy with the results of his activities, his political entrepreneurship, if we can say so. And concerning President Zelensky, of course, he's, I would say, very much concerned about the situation, because we hear from President Trump that he's going to end this conflict in 24 hours because he has the other priorities. His priority is the Pacific direction, because he sees that the major competitor in this world, and to some extent even opponent of the United States, is China. So he will pay a lot of attention to this opposition between the United States and China. He needs funds to enforce position of American military in the Pacific. And also, of course, our oil is always in the first ranks, and that's why the Middle East conflict will be also a priority. So the next administration will prioritize the other directions in foreign policy, and that's already clear now. But it's not this telephone call that will change the course of history. There are too many other factors, and of course the major factor is the idea, the proposal which was made in Bucharest summit of open door to NATO for Ukraine and Georgia. I understand that this can't be abolished, because NATO is an open alliance, but still this concept can't be put on ice.
We also spoke to Andrei Baklanov, Vice Chairman of the Association of Russian Diplomats, on the matter of the Berlin-Moscow call, to hear his views on the subject.
I think that there is only one important issue dealing with this conversation. This is the practical liquidation of the so-called blockade, political and psychological blockade of the Russian leader and the Russian Federation as a whole. So Scholz broke this blockade. He initiated this conversation, and the conversation was rather long. Well, but I do not think that both sides knew something unexpected. The position is quite clear of the both sides, so it doesn't mean that there will be any further developments after this talk. Yes, we have many people that are reporting us of what the situation in Germany. It's becoming less and less satisfactory, and the level of living is deteriorating, and this is can be characterized. This can be characterized as the kind of crisis. So, in these circumstances, Chancellor Scholz has the necessity to do something, or to imitate that he is doing something to liquidate the main source of these difficulties. The lack of the opportunity to go on with the Russian gas coming to the plants and to the houses of Germany. It was the initiative of Germany itself and NATO countries. So I think that what they have now as the results, this negative result, these are the results of their own policy. And maybe what we have now, it's a kind of early attempts to return back to what we can call normality. But it's very early to say that something will conjure up. I think that a quite new situation is appearing in Europe. There are several factors of this new situation. First, this is quite obvious military victory of the Russian troops. We are not in the haste because we are interested in liquidating the military infrastructure of Ukraine. It needs time. It's not the period of 1 and 2 months. So we are interested in liquidating this infrastructure. What we are doing each day by bombardments with our rockets and aircraft. Well, and this is a very important military aspect of the situation. And Trump factor is also very important. Under no circumstances, it's quite clear, such a personality as a Trump will make any direct military assistance if something will happen on the territory of European countries. For instance, if we will strike the objects through which the transportation is going on the territory of Ukraine. We promised that to do, and it's a very serious factor, and the countries of Europe will be in a very humiliating situation. Process of political transition in the United States of America has already started. The transition. So the president of America today cannot do anything he wants. He is already in certain limits because of the factor of the new elected president. Of course, there can be some unpleasant things. For instance, more financial pledges which this administration will try to do, but no, it will not exceed this level of financial resources given additionally to Ukraine. Zelensky is a very specific figure. He is not really nationalist of Ukraine. He is by himself. He is just playing the role for money. So he is not a political leader. He is just a traitor which would be taken to court immediately after the liberation of Ukraine. That will be his terrible, terrible destiny. He will not escape somewhere else.
Over in Peru, Chinese President Xi Jinping and US President Joe Biden met for their first talk in 7 months. Beijing related the message that it's ready to work with the new US administration under President-elect Donald Trump.
Chinese President Xi Jinping vowed to work with the incoming US administration of Donald Trump as he held his final talks with outgoing President Joe Biden. Their first talks in 7 months came as the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit in Lima, Peru was wrapping up. Xi Jinping told Biden that China's goal of a stable and healthy relationship of the two countries remains unchanged after Trump's election.
China-US relations is critical not only to the interests of the Chinese and American peoples, but also to the future and destiny of the entire humanity.
The US president said the two leaders have not always agreed, but their discussions have always been frank and candid.
We've been level with one another. I think that's vital. These conversations prevent miscalculations, and they ensure the competition between our two countries will not veer into conflict. Be competition, not conflict. That's our responsibility to our people, and as you indicated, to the people around the world.
In 2 months' time, US President-elect Donald Trump takes office. Throughout his campaign, he promised to impose blanket 60% tariffs on US imports from China. However, Beijing opposes these steps. During his previous term, Trump slapped import tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars of China's goods, seeking concessions on issues ranging from industrial subsidies to hacking, sparking retaliation by China.
As the war in the Middle East rages on, the health ministry in Gaza updated the number of killed Palestinians to over 43,700 since the conflict broke out in October last year. According to the United Nations, more than 1.8 million people face extreme hunger in the Gaza Strip. Israeli representatives in the UN challenge such reports.
The health ministry in Gaza said this Saturday that at least 43,799 people have been killed since the war began in October 2023 between Israel and the Palestinian militants. They also stated that 35 people have been confirmed dead, with 111 others injured in the last day, following continued Israeli attacks in the Gaza Strip. UN reports have indicated a risk of famine in Gaza, with data from the World Food Programme showing that 3/4 of the people in the region depend on food aid to survive. Israel was condemned for the humanitarian disaster in Gaza by an envoy from multiple countries in an emergency meeting of the United Nations Security Council on Food Security. The Israeli government, however, challenged the reports of rising food insecurity during the emergency meeting.
The IPC's own figures show that the situation in Gaza, including in the north, is more stable now than it was before October. How could they claim a famine is imminent while at the same time providing figures of an improving situation?
The United States government stated that Israel have not violated any U.S. laws after it made some changes in its operations to improve the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. However, according to the UN, more than 1.8 million people face extreme hunger in Gaza. Medical supplies are also limited as living conditions of thousands, including women and children, continue to deteriorate, with no sanitation and limited access to basic items like tents and blankets, according to humanitarian groups in the region.
The G20 summit gathering the leaders of the 20 major global economies is set to start tomorrow in Rio de Janeiro. The two-day summit in Brazil is expected to address social inclusion, global governance reform, and energy transitions. As it coincides with the beginning of the second week of COP29, UN officials hope for the G20 leaders to provide a boost and ease negotiations on climate finance in Baku.
It's all final touches from here as Brazil gears up to host the G20 summit, expecting world leaders. Among them are the US President Joe Biden and China's Xi Jinping. During Monday's opening ceremony, the country is also expected to officially launch the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty. It's an initiative aimed at mobilizing countries in the fight against hunger by 2030. Meanwhile, concerns about the effectiveness of the summit are being voiced by locals, some who claim not to see any change. On Saturday, protesters in Rio de Janeiro sank giant cutouts of top G20 leaders in Botafogo Bay.
In anticipation of the meeting of the big global leaders at the G20, we are sinking these heads to represent how these leaders, who head some of the biggest economies in the world, are failing to face climate change.
26,000 troops have been deployed around the venue to reinforce security as more protests are expected following the event. The summit will coincide with the second week of the UN Climate Conference held in Azerbaijan. UN officials hope the G20 summit will also provide political momentum for a COP29 deal on climate financing.
The COP29 summit here in Baku is on a break. Sunday comes as a day of rest before delegates from some 200 countries continue negotiating a new deal on climate finance. Just before the break, at a high-level digitalization meeting, a declaration was made on the efficient use of digital technologies in the fight against climate change. This was stated by Tomas Lamanauskas, Deputy Secretary General of the International Telecommunication Union. He explained that the commitment stems from the Green Digital Action Initiative, launched at COP28. The initiative unites over 50 partners from the digital industry and international organizations to drive progress. At a press conference, remarks were also made by Samir Bezhanov, Deputy Chief Negotiator of COP29, and Azerbaijan's Minister of Digital Development and Transportation, Rashad Nabiev, along with other officials.
We, ITU, together with our standardization partners, such as International Standardization Organization, International Technical Commission, but also broader community, have issues in standards, technical standards that are come together as an agreement of the global community, means that different private sector stakeholders together with the governments and sit together and agree on those standards. These are examples of our standards, such as standards that set the roadmaps for digital industry to meet the Paris goals, as well as we set the reporting standards for the industry in some specific areas. We as well issue the guidelines, excluding for the private, for the governments and private sector, such as our work on early warnings. integration of technologies and specifically digital technologies into the equation is very much related to us willing to do things efficiently at the same time. So and that ultimately we do believe that things could be done in an effective way, but when you bring the efficiency through the technology, it makes it even more attractive for different layers of the society, and ultimately it has the impact on the CO2 emissions and etc.
As the presidency, when we came up with overarching plan for this year to enhance ambition and enable action, under the enhanced ambition pillar, NDCs was one of the key elements. Over this months, individually as the COP29 presidents and also with our Troika partners, COP28 presidents of UAE, incoming presidency, COP30 presidents of Brazil, we have been working closely with parties and other stakeholders to support this process. As you know, the deadline for submission of the NDCs is February 2025, and we're calling once again on all parties to submit their NDCs. We are working as the COP29 presidency. We're at the final stage of the submission of our own NDC.
The second day of the parliamentary meeting at COP29 focused on addressing the unique vulnerabilities of different countries, including small island states, mountainous nations, and landlocked countries. Parliamentarians highlighted how climate change impacts social sensitivity, particularly among young people. Panel discussions explored the direct and indirect effects of climate change on human health, with a focus on the heightened risks faced by the elderly and children. It was emphasized that beyond the financial support discussed at COP29, investing in stronger healthcare systems is vital to addressing these challenges.
For me, the contribution of parliamentarians is to vote on laws in favor of climate change that can help prevent many forms of climate change. This is my wish for the past, to avoid exacerbating climate change. The role of Parliament is also to oversee the government's actions regarding commitments to fight climate change.
Every parliamentarian in here, they would like their best. Everybody is saying what will be finance of this issue, because for struggling climate change we need too much effort. It needs much more money. There is a big country such as America and China. These two countries is more than 70% of solar gas sent to atmosphere. So everybody waiting. This big country must support to finance. They must give too much finance because the small country needs the finance. That is the main subject.
First of all, parliamentarians have a key role in holding their governments accountable to their nationally determined contributions, the NDCs. So most governments have the ambition to help climate change by committing to lower emissions. Parliamentarians can hold the government accountable to these NDCs, and they can also ensure that the budgets that governments bring to their parliaments finance and also ensure that these commitments are able to be carried out. Parliamentarians have a critical role in holding government accountable, and through the government budgets, they can ensure that energy transitions are financed in the government budget when it comes to Parliament. So I think these two elements are very important, and meetings on the sideline of COP ensure that parliamentarians understand the science and also the process involved through collaboration and sharing with other countries.
Almost the entire sixth day of the United Nations Climate Conference in Azerbaijan was dedicated to usage of science and technology in promoting sustainability. Here's what we saw when it comes to industry and economy.
Day 6 of COP29 focuses on the future, exploring how science, technology, innovation and digitalization can shape the fight against climate change. A range of solutions have been presented that aim to mitigate the effects of global warming and promote more sustainable practices across industries. For example, AnewZ, Azerbaijan's national energy company, is introducing new gas turbine that will potentially reduce emissions by up to 1.6 billion tons per year.
The specialties of this gas turbine in climate change context is this gas turbine can work up to 40% hydrogen. By this way, we can reduce green gas emissions up to 1.6 billion tons per year.
New solutions are presented in agriculture as well, as irrigation's novelty is aiming to support better crop yields. According to the company, it helps farmers to manage water, time and energy more efficiently.
So how it works is that by integrating innovative water balance systems, we deliver precise irrigation through a network of pressure-regulated electronic valves. And this way, you get a notification to your phone when the soil is too hot or too dry, and then with just one button, you can start the irrigation system. And the system itself gives the precise amount of time that the irrigation system needs to work. So this way, you don't waste any water, you save a lot of energy, and also your plants grow about 250% more than they used to.
A session conducted by Azerbaijan's Innovation and Digital Development Agency at COP29 Summit highlighted how digital solutions are helping reduce paper use and waste.
The commute time that citizens spend usually is decreasing, so they don't have to go to specific government entities to get their services. They get it online in digital format, so carbon emission is decreasing. Also, our solution, digital document exchange solution, which led to saving of 1 million papers per month, which constitutes to 2,000 trees per year.
Day 6 of COP29 emphasized the role of science, technology and digital innovation in promoting sustainability. The discussions highlighted how continued innovation is key to driving both environmental and economic progress toward a more sustainable future.
Space agencies from all around the world came together in Baku and agreed on a deal to help the less developed countries gain access to satellite imagery that can help them monitor and predict events linked to climate change.
A pledge was made by global space agencies on the 60th day of COP29 in Baku. Different programs, capabilities and approaches will be united to provide developing countries with high-resolution satellite imagery, aiding in the common struggle with the climate change crisis.
We are a gateway between space agencies and their solutions and their investments on the one hand, and the needs of member states on the other. We can address the affordability challenge because space data can be highly expensive for these developing countries. We can address that by coming together.
The second summit of its kind, following the one in Dubai at COP28, brought together experts from more than 80 countries and around 20 space agencies. This cooperation isn't solely focused on building new satellites and generating new data, participants say.
Closing the end gap towards the person in need, the one who's suffering from the climate change, is exceedingly important. It proves also challenging because we need to build knowledge and competence in the countries, especially the emerging countries that are not used to working with space.
Near the end of the talks, a special message from NASA astronauts was played.
Thank you to Azerbaijan and everyone in COP29 for your efforts to protect the beauty, wonder, and diversity of our home planet.
With gratitude from space to Baku.
You're watching AnewZ and now you're up to date. Coming up, an exclusive interview with the Prime Minister of Georgia. Stay with us for more. From all of us here in Baku, have a nice evening.